Hey everybody, so I started reading this book by Jerome Bettis. It's about Jerome Bettis' life. It's called My Life in and Out of the Helmet, the Bus. Jerome Bettis and Gene Wojciechowski. So chapter one was basically just him recapping a big playoff game they had when he was playing for the Steelers. Chapter two is really where the book starts about his life. So some of the things he talked about in chapter two is when he ended up, his mother put him in private school. His parents put him in private school. He talked about how he used to make money at school. He had a gum business. So his parents used to take a trip to this store called Meijer, I believe it was called, Meijer. And while his parents were shopping, he'd be walking around stealing gum. And he was stealing gum and then putting it, going out to the car before his parents, while his parents were still in there shopping, he'd be putting it in this back seat that used to come out. He'd pull the back seat out and put the gum back there. He'd take the gum to school and sell it. He moved into Transformers. He stopped selling the gum. He moved into Transformers. So when they would go to the store, he would be stealing Transformers and then selling them at school. That's how he made money at this private school. He got caught once when his mother, because he was going out putting the Transformers behind the seat, but his mother had lost a glove, and she had asked him, like, had he seen the glove in the car? And so she thought the glove had slipped behind the seat. So she was like, look behind the seat, see if the glove behind her. And he tried to say, well, Mom, it's definitely not behind the seat. And before he knew it, his brother had pulled the seat out, and his mom found all the Transformers hidden behind the seat. He talked about how he got in a fight with his big brother when they were playing a card game as a youngster, like 12, 13 years old. This is when the shift in power, he began to dominate his big brother, I guess. Before that, it was his brothers, big brother, how they dominate the younger brothers. Talked about how he challenged his dad to a wrestling match. He invited the whole neighborhood. He thought because he was getting bigger that he could, defeat his dad. His dad ended up, his dad was 100 pounds more than he was. He invited the whole neighborhood to see this wrestling match between him and his dad. His dad ended up body slamming, picking him up and slamming him. He says he almost knocked me out. He said Dad slammed me, then just walked into the house. He says his parents, they really pushed education. They believed in education. The first sport that he ever loved was bowling. He said he used to go bowling every Saturday. His mom was an bowling instructor. He didn't play football like in middle school and stuff like that. He played flag football. And his uncle Leroy saw him playing flag football and asked his mom, could he play football, regular football, tackle football. And his mom okayed it. So his uncle Leroy was a coach at Henry Ford High School. So he was going to Henry Ford, but he ended up transferring from there because he ended up getting into like this group of kids wanted to jump him, wanted to fight him. So he ended up transferring from there. It was like 7, 8 kids that were trying to jump him. He ended up going to McKenzie High. There he got accepted on the football team by McKenzie Coach Dozier. There it talked about how he was selling drugs actually. So Coach Dozier kind of got word that Jerome was selling drugs, and he went to Jerome's house and told his mom. Mom really didn't believe it, but Jerome was thinking in his head like, yeah, he's right, I really am selling drugs. He said a lot of his friends he knew growing up, they either got killed or some of them even spend their life in prison over the drug game. In the neighborhood where he grew up, he said there wasn't a lot of doctors and lawyers and people like that to look up to, but there were drug dealers to look up to. And they had the cars, they had the girls, the fine clothes, the sneakers, and so a lot of the kids wanted to grow up and be like them. And the way to do it was to be a drug dealer. So he says they were just following in their footsteps. He says one thing that did change him, like he was into carrying guns and he was into the gang, the street type life. He says one thing that changed his life is when he was standing on the Him and his friends were standing on the corner one day, and they heard gunshots, and they realized that the gunshots were coming towards them. They were getting shot at. They scattered everywhere. One of his friends did end up taking a bullet, blew part of his arm off, and he's thinking like that could have been me. He ended up, while he was in the football playing for Mackenzie High, he developed a good friendship with another player. His name was Jamal Dokes, was his friend. And then he talked about his love for cars. He said his mom had won some money at bingo and bought Jerome his first car. It was a 1979 Mustang. So that was kind of like some of the things that Jerome Bettis talked about in the first chapter of the book called My Life in and Out of the Helmet, the Bus.